the answer. And the answer is charms, that's it. And then finally you can get to the actual words. I mean, really, you can do all that stuff past.
Yes.
And then is there not charms? And then he's still alone, right? He's over there, Rodrigo. He isn't even on stage with you. You don't even know he's there. And then ask him, but it's purely rhetorical. Don't bring him into it. Because if you do, what happens is you weaken the whole area. Because if you have to ask him for his reassurance about this, and maybe he'll say no, then it's out the window, the idea.
It was interesting, though, in your reading it this time, you looked in her direction, but I think you asked it as a rhetorical question, because it worked to me, how you can look at somebody, you know, it's almost like, blah, 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 blah. And then you focused in on her, so in a sense, I thought it really worked like that, too. Because you did throw it out at her, you did do that, only you happened to be looking in her direction.
Yeah, because when I did
And
say this,
she
there are
could
terms I was
just
starting,
write
I was feeling like I was saying that to myself. Although I moved in towards her, but I was still saying it as that's how it felt to me.
Yes.
But I could do that stronger.
Theatrically, and it's true, that happens in real life, we do it, and you can do it in theater, where you look at someone. The only thing is that it'll sound right, but it'll lose the impact that it'll have if he doesn't turn.
Right.
And he's kind of, or, you know, he's off by himself, really, totally.
Yeah.
And is there
And
not
then it
charm?
turns on the next line will have more impact.
Yeah, and then on that next line, that's rhetorical too. That can also be rhetorical, but you could give him that because you say it to him.
Okay, so you think this is also the have you not read Rodrigo?
Rightly rhetorical.
Okay.
Yeah, it could also be. Is there not sure?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
That makes it so it holds him more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, to go even a step further, see, there's no end to this. There's more and more. You don't even have to
hear the
turn
answer.
him on that.
Well, yeah, and
Because you
also,
don't even have to turn him on that.
right, and then I wouldn't really even be waiting for the answer.
Exactly.
It's almost like I'm just going to the, like, have you not read such thing? Call up my brother. It's almost like,
Call up my...
could even be an overlap.
Yeah.
I mean, if I weren't waiting for an answer, I wouldn't wait for an answer, other than to be just containing the thought a little bit longer in my head.
Sure, absolutely. You don't need his answer.
Yeah.
Because if he says no, well,
Then I'm done for. I don't want his answer, just in case. I haven't had any good news all night.
There's also a real class distinction here, right? Between Barbencio and...
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes.
Yeah, so what do I ask his,
Sure,
right. Yeah.
Although, if he can help in any way, he'll come down to his, you know what I mean? Because he says, "I wish you were here." And he's a man of his, of middle stature. He has money. Well, he had money, right? It's going very fast.
Yeah, because so it almost seems like then because Barbencio is you said Barbencio. Because I say, oh, would you have had her? It's almost like I do have to get his answer. I mean, because that's one of the things he gives me that makes me want, like him better. It's like he gives me what I want.
Yeah.
Because why else would that answer? Why would that line come so soon? If I have you not read Rodrigo some such? Because I'm not really, he is the person who's here the only person who's here that I can get any kind of help from about this situation, about information about this situation since Iago left. But would I that quickly go from absolutely not wanting, from not wanting him to have anything to do with her to like, oh, I wish that he would have her? I guess that mostly is because...
Possibly.
And also that could be because look where he is now. At least you were better than this. She'd still be in town. She wouldn't be off.
And with who?
With
a foreigner?
Yeah, but also away from me. You would be
Yeah.
moving in with me, and she'd still be taking care of me if it were you. So it could be more of that also. Like, oh God, anybody in town, even you.
Yeah. Well, they didn't marry out of their class. They married within their own group. So there was no, so he isn't part of that. But you could make an exception. I mean, if she had wanted him, there could have been a marriage.
Right.
So it isn't necessary that Brabantio necessarily has stopped it. He wouldn't necessarily prove it either because he isn't of the upper crust, but he's not a bum. If she had said Desdemona, okay, I'd like to marry him, there would have been some haggling and hassle, but I think eventually he would have approved. The main thing was she didn't want him.
Right.
And he wasn't crazy about him either, so that was enough reason to get the hell out of here.
Right.
But now look what's happening.
Yeah.
She's married a foreigner, a man who is black,
Yeah.
a man who is not part of their culture,
Business, right.
and look at the kind of work he
Yeah.
does. Oh, it's wonderful. He kills people and he protects them, but I don't want that in the family.
Yeah.
This we don't need.
Yeah.
So
Plus, he's taking her away.
and he's taking her away. Yeah. Obviously, they're not going to live together.
Of course, I guess I don't know that actually yet either. So that's like one of those assumptions.
You talking about in terms of Cyprus or in terms of?
In terms of my knowing what's going to happen in the future,
You know.
I don't know that she's going to come back here and wait for him to go off to wars and,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I wouldn't know that yet. While he's fighting, she may live here.
But even if she
You know
did, you wouldn't want her. He says in the thing when it's up to the Duke, or it seems to be, if he's willing and he says,
Oh, he disowns
because
it,
he said
right.
he doesn't want it. Oh no, it's over. He
Yeah,
would.
yeah,
It's done.
yeah, okay. It's like such an insult to the
Because
bloodline.
he has been relegated now to becoming a pariah himself.
Yeah.
They won't say it.
Yeah,
They're not going to look at him, but in the street,
Right.
they're going to laugh at him on the
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
And that's what's going to kill him.
yeah.
That plus the fact I think he's dying anyway. I think he's
Yeah.
not, that line is a key to use it. It makes sense, the line
Okay.
about the
Despised time.
despised time. It's an ugly, ugly line. Let's do it one more time and switch. And have to do reverse. Okay.
I thought she was going to start.
Revanche.
Oh, I thought we were gonna do it one more time.
No,
with hers.
I meant with you. It's okay.
Okay. How's all Rodrigo? Okay, it's too true and evil. Gone she is. And what's to become of my despised time is not but bitterness. Now, Rodrigo, where didst thou see her? Happy girl. With the Morrises. How didst thou know it was she? Oh, she deceives me past thought. What said she to you? Get more tapers. Raise all my kindred. Are they married?
Truly, I think they are.
Heaven. How she got out? Treason of the blood. Fathers, from hence trust not your daughters' minds by what you see them act. Fathers, from hence trust not your daughters' minds by what you see them act. Stand not charms by which the property of youth and maidenhood must be infused. Have you not read, Rodrigo, of such a thing?
Yes, sir, I have indeed.
Call it my brother. Oh, would you have had some one way, some another. Do you know where we may have her hinter at the moment?
I think I can discover him, if you please. To get good guard and go along with me?
Pray, lead on. At every house I'll call. And they command it most. Get weapons, ho! And raise some special officers at night. On good, Rodrigo. I will deserve your pains.
Okay, and a note, another way it can be done to achieve what we want, just to make you aware of, other possibilities, is when he comes out for Bancho, he doesn't make contact with him, physically.
Right.
Or when he even turns to him at all, except on a couple of pivotal areas, like with the Moor, says.
Right.
He could turn to him, he'd have to turn to him on that, because then he'll get the full impact of the answer. If he's turning away from him on that, and then he hears it, he's going to have to turn back to him, it's going to lose along the way. However, what I'm driving at is in the earlier ones, Now Rodrigo, where didst thou see her, O unhappy girl? That doesn't have to be, he gives it to him, but in his way. He's talking to him over his shoulder. He has other things to do. He's trying to see if the people are getting prepared right. You see what I'm saying? So there are other possibilities here. And you may do a combination of them in the scene. You may have a few lines that appear to be to him, not key lines. I'm not talking about those 3 key lines, but others that are not as important, where he doesn't turn to him there. That could be interesting. You know what I mean? And then zeroing in more physically on those particular important lines where he, so that will highlight the lines even more. So you don't get into a rut where, even on stage when it's blocked, you could conceivably have the same blocking, conceivably, and either turn or not, depending, we see which works better, which looks better, which feels better, and that's what's right, so it's not carved in rock. And yet you're achieving the same objective. That doesn't change. The advantage of that could be that it isolates him more. We see more of his perturbation, or whatever we're going to call it, his confusion. And it also will highlight even more those major areas. Okay, I want to go to any questions before I just scene 2 about not just the ending of this that we just did, but about the scene, the opening scene. We will get back to it briefly, perhaps today, to review it once. I'd like to go through it once without stopping. Well, maybe stopping as we go along. We'll see, but we won't leave it forever, I promise you, because what we'll do is we'll be talking about it as we go into the other scenes, okay? It's not ancient history, it's important in terms of everything that's, each scene will accumulate. As we go along, we'll be talking about the scenes we did in relation to what we're doing now. But any question before we go to scene 2 about the opening scene? Okay. In scene 2, we find Iago with Othello outside the Sagittary. And Desdemona is inside the Sagittary. We don't see her until the next scene, the 3rd scene. So, this is all very interesting. However, this doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. Why? Now, perhaps it does at first appearance. He just left Brabantio's, and he told Rodrigo to bring them to the Sagittary. Othello will be there, and you can do a job on him, Okay, now he's there as the well, not the harbinger, but for whatever. He's kind of going to pave the way. Okay, so what we have to ask is, number one, in the opening speech, he's talking about someone, and I stress someone who's insulted Othello. And we don't know who this person is he's talking about. It kind of narrows down, though. We just saw a scene, and he's coming from Brabantio. So it's either Brabantio or Rodrigo. Now, they get this wrong an awful lot. It's interesting, even here, and the guy who edited here is quite good, Bevington. He says, he has a note down below, by way of explanation, that he's talking about Rodrigo. So in effect, Iago is saying that Rodrigo has insulted Othello. Well, okay, this is possible. I mean, it's not crazy or anything. There's a logic to it. And I'm not attacking Bevington, by the way. He's a very good scholar, but that's not the point. They're not theater people, these scholars, quote unquote. And so they don't see what's best in terms of theater. But let's say it is him. Let's say that is Rodrigo, and he's told Othello, he's been there a few minutes, because we get the sense of the scene not being very long, and he's kind of, he's maybe had a couple of minutes talking. And he's told him about the terrible things that Rodrigo had said about him, that he's called him this name and that name, and it took all his control, all my forbearance to keep from, what does he say, yerking him in the ribs, taking the blade. It took her all nice, but of course I'm not a killer. I only kill on the battlefield. I don't kill premeditatively. Okay, and then he says, Othello, 'tis best as it is. Good that you didn't, it wouldn't have achieved anything. We see a man of equanimity, a man of maturity, etc., etc. Okay. If we do that, then we have a big break and we go to Brabantio. Then he says, Brabantio, are you securely married? In other words, he knows he's married. When he found that out, Iago. But Iago did not know he was married when he was just at Brabantio's. Because if you remember what I had said, and I was no confusion about the given circumstances, he was called to Othello's, told that they were going to be married within a couple of hours, and that right now, Othello told him, it's happening. She's being taken away, and she's going to come to me, and then we're going to have a quick marriage. Okay, he told him that. So he goes to Rodrigo, of course, as we said, to kind of pave the way and smooth it out, and have to tell him what's going on. Now it comes back to Othello's. What is he doing here? Othello didn't come back. He didn't say come back to the sea. He said come back in the morning. That's what we've created, the story that we've created. He didn't tell him to come back now. So why did he has to have an excuse for being here? Obviously. And he wants to be here. He wants to, be the go-between to see what's going on and maneuver things around. But there's got to be another reason why he's here. Obviously, he wants to antagonize Othello against Brabantio. And what he's trying to do is create antagonism on both sides, so that when they meet, and they are going to meet, it's just a matter of time, somehow or other, within a day or hours or something, these two are going to get together. And what he wants to do is create holy hell when they meet. Because once they meet, he can't do anything, Iago. He can only watch.
Well, it also, he pulls his sword. It also solidifies his position with Othello, because he says, Rodrigo, you are for me. I'm your man here. So it kind of reinforces his allegiance to Othello, makes him look great in Othello's eyes too, right?
That's a good point that you just made about his allegiance. He's playing both ends.
He's
because
deeper, looking even better.
And because Othello, no matter what happens here, he'll be criticized by the state. He'll be slapped by the state. But he's not going to be replaced by the state, as far as Iago knows, because they need him. They need him. And so he gets paid by Othello, so to speak. His work is determined by his superior, who he is. So, of course, he says that to Rodrigo. He doesn't lie about that. He says, for my own sake, I got to stay with this guy because I can't make a living otherwise. And, it's easy to look at the play and see him as a free agent, Iago, but he's not. Unfortunately, he's like most people, like us. He's got to make a living. And, he thinks he's brilliant. He's got all kinds of talent. He should be a millionaire. But he's not. And he's got to live from day to day. He doesn't get paid a lot of money. And he hasn't worked in 9 months. Now, they don't get into this in the story. We know that he's been away from the wars for 9 months, which means Iago's been away for 9 months. And so what does this mean? Well, they talk about it in terms of him, Othello. But how about Iago? How about the actor playing Iago? What does it mean to him? He isn't getting paid. They didn't pay the soldiers. They weren't working. They gave him a pittance, to barely survive. So he needs Rodrigo. He needs that money. It's very important to him, the money, that he gets from Rodrigo. But anyway, so the thing you mentioned, though, about him, when he draws the blade on Rodrigo, there's more to it than that. He doesn't want anything to happen to Rodrigo. Because if anything happens to him, he loses his money. So if he calls him out, then he knows he'll fight Rodrigo. He's not going to hurt Rodrigo. So he's protecting Rodrigo. That's the main motivation there. But you are absolutely right in the point you made, the point just before, that he showed his allegiance. So when he comes back here, one of his aims is to show him how loyal he is to him in spite of adversity. He's going to take his side against Brabantio. Wow. Because Brabantio has a lot of influence. But again, is he talking about Rodrigo? If he's talking about Rodrigo, and he could be, so what? It doesn't help us in the scene at all. But if he's talking about Brabantio, and Brabantio's the one that said all these insults, then it's helping to achieve his objective. Because then it will antagonize, he hopes, Othello against Brabantio. which is what he wants. So it can be done either way, but 90% of the time they interpret it where it's Rodrigo, or 80% of the time, or whatever. No, that won't work for our purposes. It doesn't do a thing, it just becomes a fact, and a fact is dead if we can't use it. But we can use it if it's Brabantio. So the whole opening is Brabantio said all these terrible things about you. He attacked you, and this, that, or whatever. Antagonism is in the air. And I'm loyal to you. I love you. I'll serve you, or whatever. So, also, he's got to get Brabantio, not Brabantio, Othello, or he's going to try to run away, to hide. That will help him. Because if he hides, he'll be going after him. And that will compound what's happening. He tries in the scene, even when he sees the group coming, he thinks it's Brabantio. He doesn't dream that it's Cassio and people are going to do, because he doesn't know what's going to happen. He doesn't know anything about that. He knows it's going to happen maybe in a few days. He doesn't know it's going to happen tonight. Okay, but we have to have a story here as to how does he explain to Othello that he heard all this? How could he have heard all this? It doesn't make any sense. To me, it doesn't make any sense. It's got to make sense in terms of the actor playing this. Otherwise, it's just a fact, but there's no logic to it. What I'm driving at is, let's just say that he leaves Othello's earlier. He goes to Iago, to Rodrigo. This we're all aware of. They go to Brabantio. He tells him what happened. We see the scene at Brabantio. He leaves Rodrigo, and now he goes back to Othello. But he's got to have a story. His story is that, this is not the true story, is after he left Othello, he met Rodrigo in the street. It happened, and Rodrigo was very excited. Something had taken place, very excited. And he told Iago, I've got news. Othello has arranged, I found out because I saw it happening. I happened to be near Brabantio's, or not near Brabantio's, maybe he was halfway to where he is now, and he saw them leaving the gondola, let's say. Okay? And he heard the conversations and whatever, and besides, Desdemona is not allowed freedom like this to just travel around at night at 1 o'clock or 10 in the morning or at evening or whatever. This just doesn't happen. And he heard what they were talking about. And he heard from the conversation that she is going to marry Othello. And Rodrigo told Iago that what he was going to do is he's going to go to Brabantio's, this is the whole story, he's going to go to Brabantio's and tell Brabantio what happened and reap the rewards of that. Well, that's logical, it makes sense. And he tells Iago not to say anything to Othello. And he leaves Rodrigo. And Iago says that, well, I couldn't just let this pass. I want to see what happened to protect you. So he follows Rodrigo. Okay, are you still with me? He follows him to Brabantio's. And in the darkness, he hears him awaken him. And then he hears the conversation. And that's when he hears the abrasive language that he uses against Othello. That miserable black son of a bitch, that lousy foreigner, this, that. All these ugly terms that he uses, which he told Othello about, and which he's telling him about here. And then he says, it took all my control. I was in the dark, and it took all my control to come out of the dark and say, you miserable son of a bitch, and just put a sword right through his head or whatever. Okay? But of course he didn't. But it was difficult. And then he realized, and then he saw the people coming out, the soldiers who worked for Brabantio, and they were going to go to the Sagittary, because he heard from the conversation earlier when she was leaving the gondola that they were going to the Sagittary, so he knew where Othello was. So he rushed back, that's his excuse, he rushed back to tell Othello they're on their way. So when the scene opens, Othello, now this is another thing that we don't know, but we will know by creating a story here. Othello knows that they're coming, okay? He knows they're on their way. The word is out. He thought maybe a day could go by, and maybe. And now we ask another question. A lot of stories going here, but we've got to have these stories. Otherwise, we've got no play. We've got to ask why Othello and Desdemona have chosen now to get married. I use that word propitious. It's a key word because it's the opportune time. Because he's going to be called to the Cyprus Wars. It's imminent. It's a matter of a day. Not a week, not 5 days, not 4 or 3 or even maybe 2. It's a matter of maybe a day and a half or a day or even hours before he gets called to the Senate and he's told, Othello, here are the papers, there's the ship, go. He's waiting. He knows, it's imminent. Well, what better time? He's not so stupid, Othello. You know, he may be ingenuous in ways, but he's not a fool, and neither is she. The time to have the marriage is when they need him the most. And boy, do they need him now. You see, it's not completely calculating, it's pragmatic. But again, he doesn't have to be a genius to put all this together. Now, so they agree, this is the time. It's going to be tough, though, because when they find out about the marriage, Brabantio's going to raise holy hell. And so what he's counting on, Othello, is that the Senate and the Duke will approve the marriage. And then it doesn't matter what anybody else does. Brabantio can rave and rant. The people, his friends, the Venetians, can disapprove of the marriage. They can say, you know, misogyny, it doesn't work, it's terrible, she married out of her class. Who cares? It'll be approved. And that's one of his objectives, Othello, one of his main objectives at this point in the play. The marriage is done. He wants that marriage approved. He wants it solidified. The fact that he's married, that's not enough. They can't annul the marriage. It's possible if they can prove that she was taken away or whatever against her will, or she was drugged. So, but he didn't expect the word to get out so fast. He thought he'd have some panic, maybe a day. And in that day, by the time Brabantio found out, the Senate would call for him. He goes to the Senate, they tell him, here are the papers, you're going off to Cyprus. Lo and behold, Brabantio comes in and says, wait a minute, he married my daughter. So what? We need him, you know, I'm going to worry about your daughter. So, okay, so there's a logic here. So when the scene opens, he's told him all this, Iago, the whole story that he fabricated, and now Othello is on the qui-vive. He knows that they're coming. It's just a matter of, well, how long does it take to get from Brabantio to the Sagittary? Maybe a half hour, get their troops together. So he's waiting for them to arrive. He won't go inside. When the first group comes, which turns out to be Cassio and the people from the Dukes, they assume it's Brabantio's people. But it turns out it isn't. Right, Janus? No, it's not there. I'll be a son of a gun. And he's confused, Iago, because he doesn't know what's going on. And then momentarily we find out, of course, that it's from the Duke, and they're calling him. And oh, now this is great. It's great for Othello. The timing is beautiful. Because before Brabantio arrives here, he'll be able to go to the Dukes, hopefully, get the seal to go off to the wars, and then Brabantio will make his appearance. And then what happens? So it doesn't quite work out that way, because Brabantio will arrive right after them, of course, and they're all going to go to the Dukes together. However, things are still going beautifully for Othello, because it's not tomorrow that he's going to be sent off, it's now they want him. What could be better than have the two things happen together? And now the Senate's going to have to weigh the marriage against the need for him. Now, make no mistake about it. If Othello was not needed now, let's say there were no wars in Cyprus, and let's also say that there were other generals. He's very good, Othello, whatever. There were a couple of others who were just as good, or just about as good. What they would do to Othello in a situation like this, he would go to jail, and the marriage would be annulled. No question, at the least, that is what. I'm not saying they put him to death. They'd have to prove that he drugged her. If they could do that, then he would be put to death. But if they couldn't, then he'd spend some time in jail, and that would be it. But it would not happen the way it does. There is no way that the Duke would approve this marriage. And Brabantio knows this. So I'm kind of preparing the way for the next scene, too, because these two scenes tie together. So when they go to the Senate, Brabantio is aware of this. And he's going to play his card. And his card is, we're cousins. We're all related. And what he has done is illegal. And it is illegal. It is not, a foreigner is not allowed to marry the upper class, anyone in the upper class. They're not allowed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But boy, oh boy, are they going to make exceptions tonight? You know, you see. But there's got to be, so we've got to know what's going on here so we know what's at stake for everyone. And we have to know that Brabantio, when he comes in and makes his appearance before the Senate, he has every right, yes, every right to believe that he will that he will win his case. Now, are there any questions about this? This is integral to the scene that we just did, the one we are going to do, and the one after at the
I
Hughes.
don't know what the word prated means, nay, but he prated.
He prayed it. I mean, he went on and on. He talked. He said all these ugly things. But are there any questions about the scene now? Because I just anything at all because I want to make sure that it's clear the play within the play, because without that play, the other play is just beautiful words, but it won't work. Not if we're going to do it for real, and fill in if there's a gap. So any confusion about what's happening here in terms of the background? Okay. Another thing, there's a lot happening behind the scenes here. There's a lot of subtext. There always is, but there's an awful lot here. Cassio comes in, and he says that several troops have been sent out to search for you, fellow, and they couldn't find you at home. So they're looking, but they don't know where to look. I mean, where do you look for a guy if he's not at home and you don't know where his favorite haunts are? Maybe they went to his favorite haunts. They didn't find him there either. And isn't it interesting, though, that Cassio found him? Well, not to get Hercule Poirot here to find out what's going on. That's what we have to do. It's all like a mystery.
But didn't you say Cassio knew?
Well, that's the question. Yet Cassio says, after he goes inside for a moment, he says, I'll join you in a moment. By the way, when Cassio comes, he asks Cassio, as soon as he sees Cassio with the Duke's men, it's the Duke. I mean, it's his people. That's a good sign. He's excited. So, what's the news? And he says, well, I think it's something regarding the Cyprus. Oh, wonderful. Back to war again. And also the timing is beautiful because he just got married. Great, we'll get to the Senate before Brabantio comes, and it's going to work really nice. Then he goes inside for a very brief time. Very brief. And boy, that's one of the fastest exit entrances I've ever seen ever in a Shakespearean play for sure. It is. It is the quickest exit entrance ever. And it's a tough one, because you got to ask, what the hell happens in that exit? I mean, what does he say? He closes the door. He said, I guess that's the motive right at the door, because if he's not, he'll never have a chance to say anything.
Right.
So he goes off, he says something to her, and he pops right out again. And there's 32 words exchanged between Iago and Cassio. So what we've got to do is we have to come up with about 27 words, or 28, between Othello and Desdemona. If you thought this was going to be easy, I'm not going to allow you to cheat once. If you go off that stage as Othello, you got to tell me what the hell he said to her in 28 words, so that he could say it and get back in before Cassio and Iago, before Iago tells him who he married, because you don't get back fast enough. He says, who? He says, and then he comes in, oh, are you ready to go, Captain? So you can't bluff this one. But obviously you can come up with something, but it's got to make sense. He's got to tell her something, and whatever he tells her has got to hold her in place. Because Brabantio comes in momentarily, and he says all these terrible things to Othello. Now, am I to believe that a woman who loves her man so much, she's right adjacent, she's in the building, he just went in there to talk to her, she's right at the door. Isn't she listening to this? Isn't she hearing everything? There's no mention of this. But we have got to have a story here. So she hears all of this. And why doesn't she come in? Why didn't she make an entry? Maybe that is a clue to what Othello tells her. The fact that she doesn't enter and say something will win her. And maybe it's also a clue as to what his objective is, Othello. What I'm driving at is to protect her against Brabantio's wrath. That could be a prime objective. Not just because he knows, he's going to find out anyway, so, but particularly now because he does know. But anyway, getting back to Cassio. Cassio says, well, what's going on? Why is he here? And well, what's happening? He doesn't know what the hell's going on. And then he says, well, they got married. Oh, to who? He doesn't even know who it is. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because we find out later before the temptation scene, just before it starts, that she says to Desdemona, when she's standing up for Cassio trying to get him rehired, that he came with you when you courted me, he smoothed things out. I know I mentioned this a week ago, but we have to go back over this. He mentioned what was going on. I mean, he helped you, he helped, whatever. Now, well, what's happening here? Well, what's happening is a lot of bullshit. That's what's happening here. There's bullshit in the air. That's the subtext. In other words, Cassio knows what's going on about the wedding. That's another thing with the scholars. They go on and on and on, pages, to explain this area. And they've come to the conclusion, about 90% of them, God's word, that Cassio does not know. Yes, Cassio went with him. Yes, Cassio came between them. But he never would have approved of the marriage, Cassio. Okay? Now, I'm not going to quote which scholars. I'm not going to attack certain ones. I'm talking about major name scholars today and yesterday, and this is what they come up with. Cassio did not know. Iago knew. He knew about the marriage, Iago. He helped to arrange for the gondola or whatever. Well, if that's the case, I'd like you to act this one on stage. You try to get that story going, and you'll have an interesting time. And it's out the window, the motivation. And the logic is out the window, too, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have to think that Othello didn't date a lot.
No.
I mean, it wasn't like he was going out with some other babe and then another babe. If he went out with one woman, that was probably it. So if
Absolutely.
Cassio did hook him up with Desdemona, yeah, this would have to be some kind of bullshit.
And so is Cassio just really playing Iago and seeing if Iago's bluffing about really knowing about it?
Not playing him for bluffing. What he's doing is he's doing the only thing he can do. He's feigning ignorance. There's nothing. But he also can be doing something else. You make a point. He could be finding out what Iago, how he's involved in this. Because as far as he knows, he's a little confused in Cassio. Because as far what he knows is, and which is true, is that Othello confided in no one but Cassio. And Othello wouldn't lie and say, look, you're the only one who knows about this. So Cassio is a very confused gentleman at this point. He comes in, he sees Iago. First of all, what the hell is Iago doing here? It's possible, but okay, maybe he told Iago now. Maybe he wanted him to know now. But whatever it is, Cassio does not know. So he's trying to find out himself. So they're playing a little game here, and it's really very amusing in a way, because you have Iago, who doesn't know anything about Cassio being involved in the courtship. See, that's very important. He doesn't know. If he does know, then it changes the whole story. The logic goes out the window, and also it kills the temptation scene at the beginning. Because it's a discovery for Iago at the beginning of the temptation scene when he hears her say a thing about Cassio.
Is that something that can work on stage?
Oh, yeah.
I understand, I
Well, it
know about
motivates the
subjects,
actors.
I know about everything. Yeah.
Oh, no, are you saying...
Is that something that can translate on stage? For instance, in this scene, can an audience watch the scene and go, yeah, right, Cassio doesn't know, and Iago doesn't.
Good question.
Is that just more confusing? Or
No, it won't translate the way I'm saying it. No, it won't. I can tell you the words, it'll tremendously. And also, it'll fill in. So when we go to the next scene, and the next, and when we get to the Act 2 of the temptation scene, all of what you know, the audience doesn't have to know. What the audience will know, if you know what you're doing, is that you are filled with conviction, with objectives, with a life of your own, and they'll believe it. And everything will make sense. That they'll be with you. They may not like you may be doing Iago or whatever, but they'll believe everything you do because you're filled with all the truth of it. You know what I mean? And some of it will translate. We will, to a certain extent. We will see Cassio's confusion. Yeah, he's a little taken aback here. He's not going to start flubbing all over the place, but there's a certain, confusion. And Iago can be rather high-handed about it. He's enjoying this because he knows and he doesn't. So he's, which is interesting. So he's telling him things that he assumes Cassio does not know. And he is going to tell him that he's married to Desdemona momentarily until he reappears. And of course, in retrospect, when we get to the temptation scene, in answer to the question too, is when it's the first time that we do find out for a fact, it's stated by Desdemona, that he came with him. So though the audience doesn't know now, they're going to know then. And when they know then, they're going to think back, how did they do that scene? So if the scene is done in another way or without any of that knowledge, and it's kind of taken for granted, the whole scene. In other words, what I'm saying is, if there's not a lot happening underneath, though we don't know what it is, but something's going on here between Cassio and Iago, and especially with Cassio, and there's a discomfort, there's an awkwardness or whatever. We don't know what it is. We can't translate it yet, like you say, won't you? But it will translate later. Then they're going to say, this ties to that. Everything ties together. It all ties, but not for the scholars, because the scholars don't. They don't know. They're not theater people, and they don't know. You want to get the best notes on Shakespeare over the years? You go back to actors. Like Booth and Keane and others, and you read some of the things they say. Of course, they don't have much by them. Very little. Very, very little. But, passing note here or there about a thing they mentioned when they did such and such a show, and much, much more interesting than what the scholars come up with. A Knight, Wilson Knight, was a very famous scholar, English scholar. He wrote a number of books on Shakespeare, very famous. He did a production of Othello himself, because he got the idea that it might help his understanding of the play. Unfortunately, most of what he wrote came before he did the production. But in doing the production, I'm not saying it's a good production or anything, that's not the point, it could have been a terrible production. But in being involved in it, in watching it, I think he directed it or whatever, and it may have been terribly directed, again, not the point. He learned things, and he realized in doing it, what I said in the book, it reads beautifully, he got into all these metaphors, of animals and this, and that, and spirits, and gods, in terms of the play. And Iago became the archdemon, and he was like the devil incarnate, but the real devil. Now, it may sound like it's silly. Most critics who write about the play view it that way, that they can't find motivation for him. So he's like, he represents that world, and Othello represents the pure world with Desdemona. This is very nice. It doesn't play. You were talking about play. You're trying to get that across to an audience.
I love that kind of stuff.
But it's nice to read. But you see, when he did the play, Knight realized, Jesus, wait a minute, this is good stuff I wrote. I mean, it reads well, but it doesn't play. None of it plays. And his writing changed on the play. He reevaluated it. Very interesting.
You're going to fail Pete, though. It's great.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah. So anyway, so a lot is happening between Iago and Cassio here. There's got to be definite lines that he says to Desdemona. Something like, it's got to be clipped, obviously. Like, your father knows, the Senate has called for me. They need me now. Stay here, right? Stay here unless I call for you.
Yeah.
Promise. And she says, I promise. We can do that in 22 words. Meantime, there's 32 words outside. That would give us enough time, to see what I'm driving at, to come out and cut into the speech. And you as the actor come back on stage and you feel like you're in character. You didn't just go off stage, which is what actors, let's face it, they do. They go off, they make an exit, they don't say anything, they don't think anything. They wait for the cue line, try to come in, and then, so do I. And then, but that's, And then, okay. And then Brabantio comes in. And, of course, then we have the confrontation. Another thing. This is the first time we're dealing with Othello. And, first scene, he's in. So, I'm not... The thing with the character, I'll be talking about him more and more as we go along. Unlike Iago, Othello is, I think, is easier to deal with from scene to scene. And as we build, after about 3 or 4 scenes with him in it, we'll have a very composite picture of who we're dealing with, the kind of character, the kind of man that at least I want here. Let's say to start with that from the very opening of the play until the temptation scene, until he starts to work on Iago, Othello is, everything he does is colored by his love for Desdemona and his response to that love, so that we, in effect, will see him at his best up until the temptation scene. This is going to help the thing you had said last week about, the scene is 8 lines into the scene already, and he suspects her, and 15 into it, ready to kill her, or whatever. And you're going to see, though, that there's going to be reasons, to a certain extent, why that happens. Right? And it's going to have to happen now. We're going to see him at his best, and it's going to color everything he does. It's going to determine what he does in the scene with the Senate, or how he does it. Because that is often done where he pontificates, he gives that whole long speech to the Senate, about how he courted her and whatever, and all that's very pretty. But what I'm looking for is an ingenuousness. So all the finest characters, the qualities that he has, are going to come out. And he does have some charming qualities. There's a certain innocence about him and ingenuousness.
Is it ingenuousness?
Excuse me?
It's like the best foot forward, so it's not his whole total self. He's always on his best behavior because he loves her so much. He's trying to impress her so much, like that.
Nobody, what is it? All the world loves a lover.
Yeah.
Think in those terms, in terms of the character. In other words, there's a joyfulness of spirit in him. Again, when this scene is done, often there's Othello because of the very deep voice. And he's very respectable, but he is so respectable. Well, it sounds good, but somehow, in doing that, what's lost is his response to Desdemona, who we don't see until the scene with the Senate. But think about it. He may be formal. There's a formality about him. We get that sense. He's very fine. He's not like Iago, guy. They do contrast each other beautifully, which is good. This is fine. He's very proper. He's very. I don't mean that he's cold. I'm not saying that, but he's very refined. He may be too refined in a way, and that could be a problem too in their relationship. It will be, but not to get into too much of this stuff. But what I'm driving at is we have to find the way he is, but then we have to find how it's being influenced. And his love for her is he is kindly to everyone, and he's on his best behavior, as you said. Charming, and it's real. I mean, he feels it, he believes it, he loves it. It's wonderful. He's never felt like this before. And he's been away from the wars for 9 months. I'm going to get back to this as we do the play. Those 9 months are pivotal. Never, since he's 7 years old, has he not been on the battlefield for maybe more than a couple of days. 9 months of no fighting. And he's almost become domesticated. So that's going to play a part. Okay. So when the scene opens, Othello is kind to everyone, generous, beautiful. And he wants to share this. He wants to share this with everyone too, and that's going to be important in how he responds to Brabantio, okay, and how he responds to the Senate and to the Duke. All that's going to be colored, and you're going to find when you're filled with that. If we were doing the play, rehearsing, you're playing the part of Othello, when you assume that, it's going to take care of these scenes. It's going to take care of how you deliver all these speeches. It's going to color all of them. Okay, let's take a look at the scene. It's not a long scene, but it's an interesting scene. Iago, Othello, Brabantio, and Cassio. So we have all 4. It's not 5. Okay, Mark, if you would do Othello, and Artemis, if you would do Iago, and Maggie, if you would do Brabantio. And that leaves Cassio, I think. I don't think
Cassio?
Yeah. Monica is Cassio. The only other line is an officer. And that can be, and by the way, that can also be Cassio if you have a smaller cast. If you're doing it with fewer people or whatever it is.
There's a little bit of Rodrigo in here too.
Okay. If you would pick that up.
Okay.
Rodrigo, yes, he has one line there. Yes. So that line. pick that up on that last line, the officer at the end. Okay, so whenever you're set, we'll start. I think this time we'll see. I may stop you just as we go along now, but let's see how it goes. Okay, starting with Iago.
Though in the trade of war I've slain men, yet do I hold it very stuff of conscience to do no contrived murder. I lack iniquity sometimes to do me service. 9 or 10 times I've thought to have yerked him under the ribs.
'Tis better as it is.
Nay, but he prated and spoke such scurvy and provoking terms against your honor, that with what little godliness I have, I did full hard forbear him. But I pray you, sir, are you fast married? Be assured of this, the Magnifico is much beloved, and hath in his effect a voice potential as double as the deuce. He will divorce you, or put upon you such restraint and grievance the law with all his might to enforce on it, and give him the cable.
Let him do his spite. My services, which I have done the Signore, shall out-tongue his complaints. 'Tis yet to know, which when I know that boasting is an honor I promulgate, I fetch my life, and being from men of royal siege, and my demerits may speak unbonneted, I had no idea on this section.
That's okay. Yeah, he has a way of talking.
Yeah, on this section I have gone over,
That's okay.
I fetch my life, and being from men of royal siege, and my demerits may speak unbonneted, to as proud a fortune as this that I have reached. For know, Iago, but that I love the gentle Desdemona. I would not my unhoused free condition put into circumscription, and confined for the sea's worth. But look, what light's coming out.
Okay, let's stop there before they come in. So he's early in this, Iago. He's just talking for. So he's giving a little background. Yet do I hold the very stuff of the conscience, do no contrived murder. I lack iniquity, sometimes do me service, 9 or 10 times I thought the deer came under the ribs. Those last 4 lines should all tie together. Okay, you know what I mean? So it goes from yet, and then to, and then sometimes, and then I. And each one,
Wait, so you're saying...
All the way through?
all the way through,
Every
yeah.
single one, oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't mean there won't be a break within the line. I'm just saying that, you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
So just have that thing coming down so it all ties together. Now, as far as so it's clear what he's saying here, that he's used to killing people, but not in a contrived way. In other words, he kills them in the battlefield spontaneously. If he killed him, it would have been, I'm going to kill him, but he kills him. And, he says, I lack iniquity, I lack evilness, and to do that. This is just a thought. You could play with something like this, and he could play with it. In other words, he could say, and there's other option, just giving you a few ideas here. He says, I lack iniquity, I lack the evil in me sometimes to do me service. But he says sometimes. So that could be a cute line. You know what I mean? It could be like, I lack iniquity sometimes. No, but sometimes I don't lack iniquity. Sometimes I would kill. It's just this particular time I did. That's funny. It's funny. Why not? A little humor. It's in character. It's not humor outside the play. I hate that. And that's what they do with Iago. They have fun, and the audience laughs, and the actors go crazy. All an actor has to do, especially in tragedy, is hear a laugh. Oh, God help it. I cringe when I hear that, because I know I'm in trouble, because the cast, it's gone. That actor will never be the same again. It could be 3 people out of 1,000. That's it. I did it. I got the line. I got it right. They laughed. That's not ever what I'm talking about. Okay, that's got to be clear. No, it's character. I lack iniquity sometimes, and he makes his point here. He gives an edge to the character too. And then, and you have what, it is elliptical, the next line, 9 or 10 times, where normally he would say, let me tell you, 9 or 10 times I had thought to have yerked in here. So it's a short elliptical, but it is. 9 or 10 times I had thought to have yerked in here under the ribs. You didn't quite get that one out. Contrive, I would highlight. I think that would help. You know, to do no contrive, or differentiating between the regular kind that I do. Which is, because it's, you know, on the battlefield, I mean, it's fair, what he's saying, you know. And then, tis, whatever it is, and it comes right in with the next line. That is a cue line, nay, but he prayed it. And that should tie together the next two. And spoke such scurvy and provoking terms against her. I know a few of these you have. I'm not saying you did, but I just want you to be aware of it, so that we that will tie together. And understand there are certain lines as we go along, and I break this down, where you could conceivably tie it together. What I'm choosing are areas where, by delineating it the way we are now, it's going to make it completely clear what's happening here, what's being said. And then from that, you can graduate to other colors and other things. But we've got to know exactly the logic of this. I did full hard forbearing. So it was very hard to keep from doing something. Now, big change. There's got to be a line here between him and Bud. Because it's another color. Now
So
he's
everything
talking-
ties together until there, until that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
And it relates. I mean, it does relate. It's still talking about Brabantio, but it's in another way. Now we're talking more. Now we're talking more constructively. If he was telling the truth, if he was at the beginning part here, it would be purely subjective, which is okay. It could be subjective in life sometimes. You know, it would be any fun if you weren't. You know, have candy. That's being subjective, or bad foods, whatever. But we do it sometimes. So he says. I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do that. But he's not being subjective. He's achieving his objective because he's lying. He's doing this to get on a good, even on a better side of whatever. So there's a purpose in what he's doing at the beginning. But I pray you, sir, and there should be a break there. Are you fast married? In other words, he's zeroing in now he's changing the subject now to the marriage, but now he's being very specific about the marriage. Are you fast married? So highlight those two words. In other words, are you securely married? And there again is a word substitute. This is just a small one, but it'll prepare you for larger ones that are coming. We haven't gotten to some of them yet. If he says, are you fast married, what does this mean? I mean, to us, the sound of fast. But if you say, are you securely married, you're going to get the inflection. And then carry it over to the word that you use in the play. And it works. And then be assured of this. There should be a break after that. A line there. That the Magnifico is much beloved. Beloved, not beloved. Because again, there's an urgency here. And it's, most often you will find in the plays in Shakespeare, with the exception of Coriolanus, which is very little, a lot of prose and that most of the lines, in terms of the meter, you'll find 80% of the time it's 10 syllables. It's interesting, it's amazing. You just find it almost all the time. Not always, and it isn't a set rule, but you'll always know if you find a word that can be one syllable or two, and if it's 2, it's 11 in the line, and it's 10 if you put it together. Always put it together, because it's going to sound better. You're going to get everything else you want anyway, and it's going to make the line more, not only sound better, it'll be better for you emotionally, because it's going to feel better, and it's uncanny. But he does it with his genius, of course. Okay. Are you assured that the Magnifico is much beloved, that hath in his effect a voice potential, and there'll be a tie to the next line. There's no break. It's a run over. A voice potential as double as the Duke's. And then another break. He will divorce you. Now he's telling him what another break, or put upon you a restraint and grievance, and now put this together. tie it to the next line. The law, there shouldn't be a break there, it'll work better. What restraint and grievance, the law, with all his might to enforce it on, will give him cable. Now you have a parenthetical there. So, I mentioned earlier when we started today, take it out. He will divorce you, or put upon you what restraint and grievance the law will give him cable. And you can substitute if you want there too. Or put upon you what restraint and grievance the law will give him allowance. Or the law will give him, And then now, when you've got that inflection the way you feel right in the line, then put it in the parenthetical. And then you'll have, or put upon you what restraint and grievance the law, with all his might to enforce it on, will give him cable. And if you have a break after grievance, which you could, what you're going to have is a little problem. You're going to have, or put upon you what restraint and grievance the law, with all his might to enforce it on, will give him cable. That's going to sound a little weird. I want to avoid compounding the law, and the only way we can is by running the line over. And grievance, the law. It's an option, but it's much better this way. Put upon you what restraint and grievance the law, and then parenthetical will give him cable. In Othello's speech, let him do his spite. That's fine. He's prepared for this. He knew this was going to happen. By the way, he didn't necessarily know what Brabantio would do. I mean, what words he would use to express his anger. He didn't necessarily know he would say these nasty, nasty things about him. We've got to remember that he only knows Brabantio from the times he was invited to his house. It was Brabantio's idea to have him come to dinner night after night after night. And Brabantio is, what could be nicer and more complimentary than having someone listening to your life story and totally enthralled by it, amazed by it, in love with it. And that's his relationship with Brabantio. That's his only relationship with Brabantio. But now he married my daughter. It sounds funny. You can do everything. You can't marry my daughter. And now it's a whole... So what I'm saying is Othello hasn't adjusted yet.